The screaming had stopped an hour ago, but the echoes still reverberated through the crystalline canyons of Zarian Prime. Captain Kale Ryder gripped the trembling controls of his battered Wraith-class dropship, the Nightfall, as it lurched through the planet's toxic atmosphere. Below him stretched an endless expanse of devastation. Shattered crystal formations that had once housed entire cities now jutted from the scarred earth like broken teeth. The twin crimson suns cast everything in a hellish glow, turning the smoke that rose from countless impact craters into writhing red phantoms against the amber sky. His ship groaned under the strain. The port stabilizer had been shredded by Vorthak razor shards during the retreat from the obsidian mines. Warning lights painted his face in alternating red and amber as systems fought to keep the Nightfall airborne. He shouldn't have turned back. Command had been crystal clear in their transmission. The Meridian sector was lost territory. No rescue operations. No retrieval missions. The wounded were acceptable casualties in the greater strategic withdrawal. But the signal wouldn't stop. Every 19 seconds, a faint biosignature pulse echoed through his scanner array. Weak, irregular, but undeniably broadcasting on a Zarathi military frequency. Someone was alive down there in that hellscape of broken crystal and molten metal. Someone was fighting to survive in the aftermath of the orbital bombardment that had turned Zarian Prime into a graveyard. Kyle banked hard to starboard, following the signal's origin point through a maze of floating debris and unstable crystal formations. His hands moved automatically across the controls, muscle memory guiding him through the treacherous descent while his mind wrestled with the implications of what he was doing. This wasn't just insubordination, it was career suicide. But every time he thought about turning back, he remembered the faces of the soldiers they'd already left behind, the way their eyes had looked as the evacuation shuttles lifted off without them. The signal led him deep into the scarlet wastes, where the planet's crust had been cracked open like an egg, and molten core material seeped through the fissures. Ancient Zarathi biostructures, living buildings that could regenerate and adapt to damage, lay twisted and dead, their bioluminescent circulatory systems dark forever. The very air shimmered with heat and toxic particles that made his hull plating ping and crack with thermal stress. At the center of a massive crater, beneath the collapsed remains of what had once been a command bunker, something moved. Cal brought the Nightfall down on a relatively stable shelf of cooled magma, the landing thrusters screaming in protest as they fought to maintain stability on the uneven surface. He killed the engines and grabbed his emergency medical kit, checking the atmosphere readings one final time. Barely breathable, heavy with sulfur compounds and radioactive particles, but his suit would protect him for a few hours. He sprinted across the glassed earth toward the wreckage, his boots crunching on crystallized sand and debris. The biosignature was getting stronger, more coherent, as if whatever was down there was fighting to maintain consciousness. What he found beneath the twisted organic beams made his breath catch in his throat. She was magnificent, even broken. The warrior lay pinned beneath a section of fallen bioarchitecture, her sapphire blue skin gleaming with perspiration and the luminous silver fluid that served as Zarathi lifeblood. Her hair was a striking shade of deep purple that seemed to shift and flow like liquid in the crimson light, now matted with debris and streaked with that ethereal silver. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, brilliant amber with vertical pupils that tracked his movement with predatory intelligence despite the obvious agony she was enduring. Both of her arms were gone, not severed cleanly, but torn away in the explosion that had brought down the command structure. Ragged flesh and exposed bone ended just below her shoulders, the wounds partially cauterized by the intense heat, but still weeping that luminous silver fluid that pooled in the crystalline sand around her. Each breath was a monumental effort, her powerful chest rising and falling with the rhythm of someone fighting for every moment of continued existence. She was simultaneously the most beautiful and most terrifying creature he had ever encountered, and she was dying. Cal knelt beside her, his hands hovering uncertainly over her wounds. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns of bioluminescent veins that traced across her collarbones and down her sides, pulsing weakly with her heartbeat. Her skin radiated heat even through his gloves, and there was a subtle floral fragrance to her that cut through the acrid smoke and sulfur. "Easy," he said softly, though he had no idea if she could understand him. "I'm here to help." Her amber eyes fixed on his face with startling intensity, pupils dilating as she focused on him. When she spoke, her voice was like distant thunder, deep and resonant despite her weakened state, the words flowing with the musical cadence of the Zarathi language. "Human," she said, switching to perfect Terran standard, though colored with an accent that made each word sound like a half-remembered song. "You speak—" "Why?" she interrupted, her gaze never leaving his face. There was no fear in those eyes, only a burning curiosity that seemed to look straight through him. "Why have you come to this place of death?" Kyle stared at her, this broken sentinel who should have been his enemy. The Zarathi had been humanity's adversaries for 5 years of brutal warfare. Their warrior caste bred for combat from birth, engineered for conquest and domination. Their kind knew no mercy, showed no quarter, asked for none in return. And yet, looking at her now, "Because no one should die alone in the dark," he said finally. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. For a moment, the predatory wariness faded, replaced by something almost vulnerable. "I am Vex Andra of the Crimson Talon Cadre," she said, each syllable carefully enunciated despite her pain. "I am your enemy, human. I have killed your kind in numbers beyond counting. Right now, you're someone who needs help." Her laugh was bitter, tinged with a depth of despair that made his chest tighten. "Help? Look upon me and see what I have become. I am broken, useless, a shadow of what I was. My own battle sisters fled when the Skyfire fell. They did not even pause to see if I still drew breath." Kyle began unpacking his medical supplies, his movements careful and deliberate. The biostabilizers were designed for human physiology, but the universal trauma suppressors should work on most carbon-based life forms. "What's your name?" "Your real name, not your rank." She hesitated, those amber eyes studying his face as if searching for deception. "Vex Andra is my name. Among my people, we do not separate identity from purpose as yours do." "I'm Kale." He activated a biostabilizer, watching as the device's sensors analyzed her alien physiology and began adjusting its output accordingly. "I'm getting you out of here, Vexandra." "To what end?" Her voice carried a weight of anguish that cut through him like a blade. "I cannot fight, cannot serve my cadre, cannot even feed myself. I am nothing without my arms, nothing without my purpose." Kale met her gaze, seeing past the pain to the fierce intelligence that burned behind those alien eyes. "You're wrong." He worked quickly but carefully, stemming the flow of silver blood with synthetic coagulants and injecting her with a cocktail of pain suppressants and cellular stabilizers. The biostabilizer hummed as it began accelerating her natural healing processes, sealing the major vessels and preventing further blood loss. All the while, she watched him with those unsettling amber eyes, studying his every movement as if memorizing each detail. "Why do you care what happens to me?" she asked as he prepared to move her from beneath the debris. "What do you gain from this act?" Kyle paused, considering his answer. How could he explain the weight of watching too many good people die, of following orders that felt wrong in his gut, of the growing conviction that somewhere along the way they had all stopped seeing each other as anything more than obstacles to victory? "Because 6 hours ago, I watched my squadron leave a wounded kid behind because extracting him wasn't mission critical," he said finally. "I've been asking myself the same question you are. When did we stop seeing each other as people worth saving?" Moving her required every ounce of strength he possessed. Zarathi were significantly larger and more muscular than humans, their bodies dense with corded muscle beneath skin that felt strangely warm and supple to the touch. She bit back a cry of agony as he lifted her, her entire body going rigid with the effort of staying conscious. The journey to his ship felt endless, each step a battle against her weight and his own exhaustion. The Nightfall's medical bay was cramped but well-equipped. Kyle laid her on the primary treatment pod, the biomonitors immediately beginning their analysis of her alien physiology. Her vital signs were alien but seemed stable, the rhythmic patterns suggesting a cardiovascular system under extreme stress, but still functioning. "Your ship," she said weakly, her gaze moving around the cramped compartment with professional assessment. It is small for a rescue vessel. Where is your unit? This isn't a rescue vessel. I'm just a transport pilot who made a very stupid decision. Stupid? There was something almost like amusement in her voice, a hint of the dry humor that seemed to be universal among warriors. Catastrophically stupid. I'm probably going to spend the rest of my life in a military prison for this. She was quiet for a long moment, her breathing gradually steadying as the pain suppressants took effect. I dreamed of dying in glorious battle, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Of falling with honor, my weapons in my hands, my enemy's blood staining my claws. Instead, I lay broken in the dirt, while my own battle sisters abandoned me to save themselves. Kyle activated the ship's autopilot and set course for the outer system, though he still had no clear destination in mind. Dreams have a way of changing. Not for my kind. We are bred for war, shaped by conflict from the moment we draw first breath. Without battle, we are less than nothing. Maybe that's exactly the problem. She turned her head to look at him, and for the first time, he saw uncertainty flicker across those predatory features. What do you mean by that? Maybe you're more than what someone else designed you to be. Maybe we all are. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken questions. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small drama playing out in the confines of the medical bay. Kel found himself studying her face, trying to reconcile the deadly warrior she claimed to be with the broken, vulnerable woman lying before him. Tell me about yourself, he said finally. Before the war, before the breeding programs and the military conditioning. What do you remember from when you were young? Vexandra's expression became distant, as if she were looking back across a vast gulf of time and pain. Young, she repeated, as if the word were foreign to her. I remember colors, the way the crystal forests would sing when the wind moved through them, the taste of nectar fruits during the blooming season, my clutch sister Nira, how she would laugh when we would sneak away from the training compounds to watch the star dancers in the night sky. What happened to her? She died in her third campaign. Glorious death, they called it, the kind every warrior dreams of. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I envied her for years. And now? Now I think perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that she died, but that she never lived to see anything beyond war. That evening, as they drifted through the void between worlds, Kale found himself unable to sleep. He stood at the observation deck, watching the starfield through the reinforced transparasteel, when he heard movement behind him. Vexandra had somehow managed to get up and move through the ship despite her injuries, using her powerful legs and core strength to navigate with a fluid grace that was both impressive and heartbreaking to witness. You should be resting, he said without turning around, acutely aware of her presence behind him, like a gravitational pull. Rest is for those who have a future to save their strength for, she replied, settling beside him with obvious difficulty. The subtle floral scent of her skin mixed with the recycled air, and he found himself stealing glances at her profile in the starlight. I find myself restless, filled with thoughts I do not understand. What kind of thoughts? She was quiet for a long time, her amber eyes reflecting the distant stars. When she spoke, her voice was softer, more vulnerable than he'd ever heard it. Thoughts of what comes next. For so long, my path was clear. Fight, kill, die with honor. But now I exist in a space between worlds, belonging to neither yours nor mine. Kale turned to face her fully and was startled to find her already watching him. And what about thoughts of other things? What other things? She asked, though something in her eyes suggested she knew exactly what he meant. Of connection, of finding someone who sees you as more than a weapon. Her breath caught almost imperceptibly. Such thoughts are dangerous for my kind. We are taught that emotional bonds make us weak, vulnerable. And what do you think? I think, she said, her gaze dropping to his lips before meeting his eyes again, that perhaps my kind has been wrong about many things. The space between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then Vexandra shifted slightly closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Kyle, she whispered, his name like a prayer on her lips. Yes? I am frightened by what I feel when I look at you. His heart hammered against his ribs. "What do you feel?" "Alive," she breathed. "For the first time in my existence, truly alive. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe the space between is where the interesting stuff happens." She turned to study his profile in the starlight. "You are a strange human, Kyle Ryder. Most of your kind I have encountered sought only to destroy or dominate. You offer something I do not have words for. Hope? Perhaps. Or perhaps simply the novel experience of being seen as more than a weapon to be pointed at an enemy." They stood together in comfortable silence, two beings from warring species finding an unexpected moment of peace in the vast emptiness of space. Cal found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him, the subtle heat radiating from her skin, the way her breathing created small clouds of vapor in the ship's cool air, the faint floral scent that seemed to follow her like a signature. "What will you do with me?" she asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. "I'm not going to do anything with you. You're not my prisoner." "Then what am I?" He turned to face her fully, seeing the vulnerability she was trying so hard to hide behind her warrior's mask. "You're someone who deserves a choice about what happens next." "Choice." She repeated the word as if tasting something foreign. "My people do not believe in choice. We believe in duty, in purpose, in the inevitability of genetic destiny. What do you believe?" For the first time since he'd found her, Vex Andra smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face completely, softening the predatory angles and revealing the woman beneath the warrior. "I am beginning to believe that perhaps my people are wrong about many things." 3 days into their journey, Kel made a decision that would change both their lives. Vex Andra was recovering with remarkable speed, her alien physiology responding well to the medical treatments. She had learned to navigate the ship despite her missing limbs, her powerful legs and core, allowing her to move with a dancer's grace. But with her returning strength came a restless energy that filled the small vessel like a caged storm. More concerning was the way she looked at him, not with gratitude but with the calculating assessment of a predator studying potential prey. He was beginning to understand that helping her had been the easy part. What came next would test them both in ways he couldn't yet imagine. That night he found her in the ship's tiny galley, attempting to use the food synthesizer with clumsy foot controls. Frustration radiated from her like heat from an engine core. And when she noticed him watching, her amber eyes flashed with dangerous embarrassment. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm some helpless creature to be pitied." Her voice carried an edge that could cut through hull plating. "I can see it in your eyes. You think you've rescued some broken thing that needs to be taken care of." Cal stepped closer, ignoring the warning in her posture. "You're right. I do think you need taking care of. Just like I need taking care of. Just like everyone does." "I am not everyone." She turned to face him fully, and despite her missing arms, she was still magnificent, deadly and beautiful, and utterly alien. "I am a weapon designed to kill your kind, and now you've made me dependent on you." "I haven't made you anything. You are what you choose to be." "Choice," she laughed bitterly. "You speak of choice as if it were some gift you've given me. But choice requires options, and what options do I have? Return to my people who abandoned me? Live among yours who would see me as a monster? Or stay here, in this metal box, playing house with the human who thinks he saved me?" The accusation hit him like a physical blow, but he didn't back down. "Is that what you think this is? Some kind of fantasy where I'm the hero and you're the grateful victim? Isn't it?" She moved closer, and he could smell that subtle floral scent that seemed to emanate from her skin. "Tell me, Kale Ryder, when you look at me, what do you see?" The question hung between them like a challenge. He could lie, give her the safe answer, pretend that his feelings were purely humanitarian. Instead, he chose honesty. "I see the most dangerous woman I've ever met," he said quietly. "Someone who could kill me with her bare hands, or would if she still had them. I see a warrior who's never learned that she's allowed to be afraid. And I see someone who's been told she's nothing but a weapon for so long that she's forgotten she's also a person." Her eyes widened slightly at his words. But mostly, he continued, stepping close enough that he could see the intricate patterns of bioluminescence beneath her skin, I see someone who makes me want to be better than I am. For a long moment, they stood frozen, the space between them crackling with unspoken tension. Then Vex Andra's expression crumbled, revealing the vulnerability she'd been fighting so hard to hide. I don't know how to be anything else, she whispered. I don't know how to be weak. Being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. For my kind, it is. Cal reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands, feeling the warmth of her skin against his palms. Then maybe it's time to discover what your kind really is, instead of what they told you to be. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch with a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. You make me feel things I was taught were forbidden. What kind of things? Hope, she breathed. Desire. The terrible, selfish want to live for myself instead of dying for others. When she opened her eyes, they were bright with unshed tears. I think I'm falling in love with you, and it terrifies me more than any battle I've ever fought. You cannot keep me indefinitely, she said without preamble, as he brought her the evening nutrition supplements. Cal nearly dropped the tray. What? I see how you watch me when you think I am not aware. You believe you have saved me, made me yours through this act of mercy. That is not how this arrangement functions. Heat flushed his cheeks. I never thought, that's not what this is about. No? She moved closer, and despite her condition, there was something undeniably dangerous about her presence. Even without arms, she radiated a lethal grace that made every instinct in his body scream warnings. Then what is this about, Kale Ryder? I thought you needed help. And after the help, what then? She was close enough now that he could see the intricate patterns of bioluminescence beneath her skin, the way they pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Do you plan to keep me as some sort of exotic pet? A trophy of your misguided compassion? Cal set the tray down and turned to face her fully. I plan to take you somewhere safe and let you decide what happens next. Safe? She laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. There is no safe place for me now. My cadre will consider me dead, a dishonor to be erased from their records. Your people will consider me an enemy, a threat to be eliminated. I exist in the void between worlds, belonging to neither. Then we make a new world. The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. She studied his face with that unsettling intensity, searching for deception or hidden motives. You speak of impossibilities, she said finally. I'm getting good at those. That night, Kale found her standing at the observation window again, her silhouette stark against the starfield. She had somehow figured out how to operate the external cameras and was watching the void with the intense focus of someone searching for meaning in the darkness. Do you regret it? She asked without turning around. Taking me from Zerion Prime? Kale joined her at the window. Do you regret being taken? I should. Death would have been simpler, cleaner, expected. But she was quiet for a long time, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent steel. But I find myself experiencing something I have never known before. What's that? Curiosity about tomorrow. Their destination was Haven Station, a massive civilian outpost that operated in the neutral zone between human and Zerathi space. It was a place where laws were suggestions and questions were discouraged as long as the docking fees were paid promptly. More importantly, it was home to Dr. Sarah Chen, a former military medic who had gained a reputation for performing medical miracles that skirted the edge of legality. The station appeared on their screens like a sprawling metal city floating in the void, its multiple rotating sections creating artificial gravity through centrifugal force. Hundreds of ships moved around it in carefully orchestrated patterns, freighters carrying goods between the warring factions, passenger vessels full of refugees and traders, and more than a few military craft that officially didn't exist in this sector. It's remarkable, Vex Andra breathed, watching the display with wide eyes. I have never seen anything like it. It's controlled chaos, Kale replied, but he understood her fascination. For someone who had never known anything beyond military installations and battle zones, Haven Station must seem like a glimpse into an alien world where different species coexisted in relative peace. Docking required careful navigation through the station's labyrinthine structure and more than a few bribes to docking officials who preferred not to ask questions about ship manifests. Kale finally secured a berth in Section 12, a lower-level area known for accommodating ships and crews that might not pass more stringent inspections. Dr. Chen met them at the airlock, a woman in her 40s with silver-streaked black hair and cybernetic implants that enhanced her surgical precision. She took one look at Vexandra and let out a low whistle. "Well, this is definitely a first," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of a childhood spent in the outer colonies. "Zarathi physiology is complicated enough when all the parts are still attached." Vexandra straightened, her bearing becoming regal despite her condition. "I did not request your pity, human." Dr. Chen grinned, apparently delighted by the response. "Good thing, because I don't give it. What I do provide is results. You want your arms back or not?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kale found himself holding his breath, waiting for Vexandra's answer. This was the moment of truth, the point where she would have to decide what kind of future she wanted to build. "What kind of results are you capable of providing?" Vexandra asked carefully. "The kind that will let you catch a plasma bolt in mid-flight if you're inclined to show off," Dr. Chen replied bluntly, "though I'd prefer you use them for more constructive purposes." "And the cost for such miracles?" Dr. Chen named a figure that made Kale's stomach drop. It was more than he could afford even if he sold everything he owned and liquidated his military pension. "I'll cover it," he said quickly. Both women turned to stare at him. Vexandra's expression was unreadable, but there was something burning behind those amber eyes. "You would impoverish yourself for my sake?" she asked. "I would invest in your future." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Vexandra nodded slowly. Decision made. "Then let us discover what manner of miracles your Dr. Chen can perform." The procedure took 22 hours. Kyle paced the waiting area like a caged predator, unable to focus on anything for more than a few minutes at a time. He tried reading technical manuals, tried reviewing star charts, tried sleeping in the uncomfortable chairs provided for anxious relatives. Nothing worked. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Vexandra broken in that crater, those proud amber eyes filled with pain and despair. Dr. Chen emerged from the surgical bay, looking exhausted but pleased with herself. Her scrubs were stained with various colored fluids, and there were dark circles under her eyes, but she was smiling. "It's done," she announced. "The biointegration was more complex than I anticipated. Zarathi neural pathways are remarkably sophisticated, but her physiology proved incredibly adaptive. The new limbs should feel completely natural within 72 hours. New limbs? Biosynthetic reconstructions. I grew them from her own cellular material and enhanced them with adaptive smart fibers. They'll be stronger and more durable than her original arms, but they'll feel and respond exactly like biological tissue. The sensory feedback is actually superior to natural limbs. She'll be able to feel texture, temperature, and pressure with greater acuity than before." Cal felt a tight knot in his chest finally release. "And she's stable and asking for you. Fair warning, though. The anesthetics we use on Zarathi physiology can cause some interesting side effects. Don't be alarmed if she seems a bit emotional." He found Vexandra sitting upright in the recovery bed, flexing her new hands with an expression of wonder that transformed her face completely. The artificial arms were perfect matches for her original limbs, the same sapphire blue skin tone, the same subtle musculature, even the same intricate patterns of bioluminescent veins that traced across her shoulders and down her biceps. "Kyle," she said when she saw him, and something in the way she spoke his name made his heart skip several beats. "How do you feel?" She held up her hands, turning them slowly in the soft light of the medical bay. "Complete," she said softly. "For the first time since the explosion, I feel whole again." She reached out suddenly, her new fingers tracing the line of his jaw with exquisite gentleness. Her touch was warm and real and alive, sending electrical impulses racing up his spine. For a moment, they both froze, the significance of the gesture hanging between them, like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "I can feel everything," she whispered, wonder filling her voice. "The texture of your skin, the warmth, even the slight roughness where you need to shave." Her thumb traced across his lower lip, and his breath hitched. It's more real than my original hands ever were. Cal's heart thundered as her fingers explored his face with scientific curiosity that gradually transformed into something deeper, more intimate. Vexandra, he said softly, her name a question and a plea. I have never wanted anything for myself, she said, her amber eyes luminous with unshed tears. Everything I was, everything I did, was for others' purposes. But you make me want to be selfish. Then be selfish, he whispered, leaning into her touch. I don't know how. Start with this. He covered her hand with his, pressing it more firmly against his cheek. Start with what you want right now in this moment. Her eyes searched his face as if memorizing every detail. I want to understand what this feeling is. This fire in my chest when you look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm worth saving. Like I'm worth loving. The word hung in the air between them, fragile and precious. Then she leaned forward, her forehead touching his, their breath mingling in the small space between them. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotions she was struggling to contain. Not just for my arms, for showing me I have a heart. And then she kissed him. It was not the desperate kiss of survival or the grateful kiss of a patient to her savior. It was the kiss of a woman who had discovered something unexpected in the darkness and wasn't willing to let it slip away. Her new hands cupped his face with infinite tenderness, and he could taste the salt of tears on her lips. Whether his or hers, he couldn't tell. When they finally broke apart, Kyle rested his forehead against hers, breathing in the subtle floral scent that clung to her hair. What happens now? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Now, she said, her amber eyes bright with possibilities he had never imagined. We discover who we are when we are no longer what others made us to be. But even as she spoke the words, he could see doubt creeping into her expression. She pulled back slightly, her new hands flexing experimentally as if testing their responsiveness. These arms, she said quietly, studying her fingers in the medical bay's soft lighting. They're beautiful, perfect, but they're not mine, are they? They're grown from your own cells. That's not what I mean. She looked up at him, vulnerability replacing the wonder that had been there moments before. I'm not the same person you pulled from that crater. I'm something new, something artificial. How can you be certain that what you feel for me is real and not just gratitude, pity, some human need to care for broken things? Kel felt his heart clench at the pain in her voice. Vexandra. No, listen to me. She stood, pacing the small medical bay with restless energy. On Haven Station, there are dozens of species living together, trading, coexisting. But relationships between them, true partnerships, they're rare, Kale. And when they do happen, they're often based on curiosity or novelty rather than genuine connection. You think that's what this is? She stopped pacing, her back to him. I think you're a good man who saved someone who needed saving, and now you feel responsible for what happens to her. I think I'm a traumatized warrior who's confusing rescue with romance. The words hit him like a physical blow, but he forced himself to really consider them. Was she right? Was he conflating his protectiveness with deeper feelings? Was the intensity of their situation creating artificial intimacy? You might be right, he said finally, causing her to turn around in surprise. Maybe what we're feeling isn't real. Maybe it's just adrenaline and proximity and the drama of everything we've been through. Her face fell slightly, as if she'd hoped he would argue with her. But, he continued, stepping closer, there's only one way to find out, which is time, normal time, without crisis or drama or life or death situations. Time to see if what we feel survives the ordinary moments. He reached for her hand, marveling again at how perfectly real her new fingers felt. Time to discover if we still choose each other when we're not running for our lives. She stared at him for a long moment, then brought his hand to her lips, pressing a soft kiss to his knuckles. And if we discover that it was just trauma and proximity, then we'll have learned something important about ourselves. And we'll still be friends who've been through something incredible together. And if it's real, his smile was answer enough. 2 weeks later, they received a visitor that changed everything. Commander Six Karath of the Crimson Talon cadre was everything Kale had expected a high-ranking Zarathi officer to be. Tall and imposing, with intricate ritual scarification covering his dark blue skin and eyes like molten gold that seemed to see straight through to your soul. He arrived on Haven Station with minimal escort, a sign of either supreme confidence or barely controlled desperation. "Battle, sister," he said when he saw Vexandra, his voice carrying complex harmonic undertones that Kale's human ears could barely process. "Six." Vexandra's voice was carefully neutral, but Kale could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her new hands clenched almost imperceptibly at her sides. "I confess surprise at seeing you in this place, as I am surprised to find you among the living." His golden eyes flicked to Kale with undisguised disdain. "And in such curious company." They were meeting in a neutral cantina on the station's commercial level, a place where weapons were checked at the door and violence was discouraged by the presence of heavily armed security personnel from a dozen different species. Cal sat beside Vexandra, close enough to offer support, but trying not to appear possessive or territorial. "You were reported as killed in action," Six continued, his attention returning to Vexandra. "Your biosignature went dark during the orbital bombardment. The tactical withdrawal was ordered immediately after." "The tactical withdrawal was ordered before my signature went dark," Vexandra said evenly, her voice carrying a core of steel that made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. "I remained conscious in the ruins for over 4 hours before Kale found me." Something flickered across Six's scarred features, too quick to identify, but definitely not surprise. "War demands difficult choices. War demands many things. Honor should still be paramount among them." "Honor?" Six's laugh was bitter and sharp. "You speak of honor while sitting beside our sworn enemy, your body rebuilt by alien science, your very existence a violation of everything we hold sacred. Where is the honor in that battle, sister?" Vexandra stood slowly, her movements flowing like liquid mercury. The motion was completely natural, betraying no hint that her arms were anything but original Zarathi biology. "The honor lies in choosing my own path instead of dying for someone else's convenience." "You were bred for service." "I was bred for war," she interrupted, her voice cutting through his words like a blade through silk. "But I choose to live for something greater than destruction." Six's gaze swept over her, taking in her civilian clothing, her relaxed posture, the way she stood protectively close to Kale. "You have been corrupted, sister. The Vexandra I knew would never have allowed herself to be domesticated." The word hit like a physical blow. Cal felt Vexandra tense beside him, saw her new hands flex as neural pathways tested their strength against simulated resistance. "Domesticated?" she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "What else would you call this?" Six gestured at the cantina, at Kyle, at her. "Living among merchants and scavengers, playing at being civilized, denying your true nature. You are a weapon, Vexandra. You were crafted to fight, to conquer, to dominate. This pacification is beneath you." "You're wrong," Cal said, speaking for the first time since Six's arrival. The Zarathi commander turned his attention to Kale, his expression one of mild interest, as if examining an unusual specimen of insect. "The pet has opinions." Cal felt anger flare in his chest like ignited plasma, but before he could respond, Vexandra moved. Her new hand shot out faster than human reflexes could follow, fingers closing around Six's throat with precisely calculated pressure. The commander's eyes widened as he found himself unable to breathe, his hands clawing uselessly at her grip, while his powerful frame was held immobile by her superior leverage. "I am not domesticated," Vexandra said, her voice carrying deadly calm that made every other conversation in the cantina fade to whispers. "I am not corrupted. I am not diminished in any way. I am evolved." She held him for another moment, allowing him to feel the full strength of her new limbs, then released him with a contemptuous flick of her wrist. Six staggered backward, one hand at his throat, his golden eyes filled with something that might have been newfound respect. "The offer stands," he said hoarsely, his voice rough from the pressure she had applied. "Return to the cadre. Resume your position among the elite. All transgressions will be forgiven and forgotten. There are no transgressions to forgive, Vexandra replied calmly, and nothing to return to. Six straightened his uniform, his composure gradually returning. You will regret this choice, Battle Sister. When the novelty of playing house with this human fades, when you remember what you truly are, you will regret abandoning your heritage. Perhaps, Vexandra acknowledged, but it will be my regret to bear, made by my choice alone. After Six left, they sat in silence for a long time. Kyle could see the tension slowly leaving Vexandra's shoulders, the way her new hands trembled slightly with suppressed adrenaline and emotion. You didn't have to defend me like that, he said finally. Yes, I did. She turned to look at him, her amber eyes fierce with protective anger. He called you a pet. He implied that I was yours to command and control. Both are insults I will not tolerate from anyone. And the part about regret? She was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. I cannot promise you that I will never doubt this path we have chosen together, Kale. I cannot guarantee that I will never question the choices that brought us to this point. But I can promise that whatever doubts I may have will be mine alone to wrestle with, and whatever choices I make will be freely given. And what choice are you making now? Her smile was radiant, transforming her face completely. I choose to see what tomorrow brings. The attack came 4 days later, shattering the peaceful routine they had begun to establish. Kyle woke to alarms blaring throughout the station and the distinctive whine of plasma weapons charging for combat. Through their quarters viewport, he could see ships moving in aggressive attack formations. Zarathi raiders, their biohulls gleaming like living metal under the station's external lights, their weapon arrays glowing with deadly energy. Vexandra! He shook her shoulder, but she was already awake, her enhanced reflexes having responded to the danger before conscious thought could process the threat. Six, she said immediately, understanding the situation with warrior's instincts. He has come to collect me by force. They dressed quickly, grabbing emergency supplies and defensive weapons from their quarters' storage lockers. Kale checked his sidearm while Vexandra tested her new arms with experimental movements, flexing and extending them, as if reacquainting herself with their capabilities. Can you fight? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Her smile was sharp as a vibroblade. Let me show you what evolution looks like in practice. The station's corridors were pure chaos, civilians fleeing toward escape pods and emergency shelters, security forces trying to coordinate a coherent defense, traders and smugglers making split-second decisions about whether to run or stand their ground. Kyle and Vexandra moved through it all with shared purpose, heading for the docking bay where the Nightfall waited. They made it 2/3 of the way before the first Zarathi strike team found them. 4 warriors in full combat bioarmor, their weapons already spitting coherent plasma fire that left molten gouges in the corridor walls. Cal dove for cover behind a structural support pillar, returning fire with his pistol, a weapon that felt woefully inadequate against their armored opponents. Vexandra didn't take cover. She moved like liquid lightning, her new arms extending and flexing with inhuman grace and precision. Her hands struck with surgical accuracy. A blow to disable, another to disarm, a third to render unconscious. She flowed between her opponent's attacks like water through a sieve, never where they expected her to be, always 3 moves ahead of their combat algorithms. In less than 40 seconds, all 4 warriors were down. Definitely evolved, Kyle breathed, watching her work with a mixture of awe and arousal that he tried to keep off his face. They reached the docking bay to find it under full siege. Zarathi boarding craft had breached the outer hull in multiple locations, and armored warriors were pouring through the gaps like an unstoppable tide. The Nightfall sat on the far side of the bay, apparently untouched but separated from them by what amounted to an active war zone. We'll never make it across that, Kale said, assessing the tactical situation with a pilot's eye for escape routes in defensive positions. Yes, we will. Vexandra's voice was calm, confident, carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had spent her entire life calculating odds and finding ways to overcome them. Trust me. She stepped into the open, her hands raised in a gesture of temporary truce. Immediately, every weapon in the bay swung toward her, targeting systems locking onto her biosignature with mechanical precision. "I am Vex Andra of the Crimson Talon Cadre," she called out, her voice carrying across the chamber with resonant authority. "I invoke the right of personal combat against your commanding officer." The firing stopped instantly. Ancient Zarathi law had been invoked. When a warrior of sufficient rank called for single combat, honor demanded that the challenge be answered or acknowledged as a mark of cowardice. Six emerged from behind a boarding craft, his own weapons holstered in accordance with tradition. "Battle sister," he said formally, "you would invoke the ancient ways. I would end this without further bloodshed. And the terms of this combat? If I prove victorious, your forces withdraw from this station and leave us in peace. If you prove victorious—" She paused, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "You may claim whatever prize you believe you have earned." Six nodded slowly, ritual satisfaction evident in his scarred features. Witnessed and accepted by all present. The two Zarathi faced each other in the center of the docking bay, Kyle and the gathered warriors forming a circle around them in accordance with tradition. There would be no weapons in this contest, only hands and will, and the kind of brutal strength that separated warriors from mere soldiers. They circled each other warily, each looking for an opening in the other's defenses. Six was larger and more experienced, a veteran of countless campaigns who had earned his rank through superior skill and ruthless efficiency. But Vex Andra had something he didn't possess, the desperate strength of someone fighting not just for victory, but for the right to choose her own destiny. Six struck first, his movements fluid and devastatingly powerful. Vex Andra deflected the blow, countered with her own attack, spun away from his follow-up strike with balletic grace. They traded impacts with increasing intensity, their enhanced physiology allowing for exchanges that would have shattered human bones and ruptured organs. Kyle watched in fascination and terror as the woman he had come to love proved herself against the embodiment of everything she had once been. Her new arms moved with perfect coordination, no hint of their artificial nature visible in their responses. If anything, they seemed stronger and more precise than her originals, responding to her thoughts with mechanical perfection. The fight raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Both combatants were bleeding from multiple wounds, breathing hard as they pushed themselves to their absolute limits. Then Vex Andra found her opening. Six overextended on a particularly powerful strike, leaving himself momentarily vulnerable. Vex Andra's response was swift and merciless, a combination of moves that left him broken on the deck plating, conscious but unable to continue fighting. She stood over him, breathing hard but clearly victorious. "The terms have been met," she said formally. "Withdraw your forces and leave us in peace." Six looked up at her with something that might have been pride mixed with profound disappointment. "You have become something I did not expect, Battle Sister. I have become myself." The Zarathi forces withdrew without further incident, their boarding craft detaching from the station's hull and disappearing into the void. Within 2 hours, Haven Station was beginning to return to its normal state of controlled chaos. Cal found Vex Andra sitting alone in their quarters, staring out at the star field beyond the viewport. Her new arms were wrapped around her knees, and there was something profoundly vulnerable about her posture that made his heart ache with protective tenderness. But as he approached, he noticed the fine tremor in her hands, the way her breathing was still slightly elevated from the fight. She was coming down from the combat high, and with it came the full realization of what had just happened. "How do you feel?" he asked, settling beside her on the small couch. "Free," she said simply, but her voice was shaky. "For the first time in my entire existence. Truly and completely free." "And terrified," he observed gently. She turned to look at him, her amber eyes bright with unshed tears. "When Six had me in that chokehold, when I felt his strength against mine, I realized something that horrified me." "What?" "I wasn't afraid of losing the fight. I wasn't afraid of dying." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I was afraid of never seeing you again, of never getting to find out what we could be together." Cal felt his breath catch. "Vex Andra, no, let me finish." She turned to face him fully, her hands reaching for his with desperate urgency. "For my entire life, I've been taught that attachment is weakness, that caring for another being makes you vulnerable, exploitable. But when I thought I might die in that docking bay, All I could think about was how unfair it would be. Not to me, but to you. How you'd saved me, given me a second chance at life, and I'd wasted in some pointless ritual combat. She was crying now, silver tears tracing paths down her blue cheeks. I love you, Cal. I don't know how it happened or when it happened, but somewhere between that crater on Zarian Prime and this moment, you became more important to me than my own life, and that should terrify me, but instead it makes me feel more alive than I've ever been. Cal cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. I love you too. So much it scares the hell out of me. Really, really. When I saw you facing Six, when I realized you might not survive that fight, he shook his head, unable to finish the thought. I've lost people before. Good people. Friends, comrades, lovers. But the thought of losing you felt different. Final. Like losing you would mean losing the best part of myself. She kissed him then, soft and desperate, and full of all the things they couldn't put into words. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, their breathing slowly synchronizing. What does this mean for us? She asked. Two beings from warring species, with no home, no people, no place in either of our worlds? It means we make our own world, he said firmly. Together. Together, she repeated, and this time the words sounded like a promise. 6 months later, Cale found himself on the bridge of the independent freighter, Aurora's Dawn, watching navigation coordinates scroll across his display screens. Their destination was a small agricultural colony on the rim, far from the established shipping lanes, and even farther from the ongoing war between human and Zarathi forces. Vex Andra stood beside him at the ship's controls, her blue hands steady and sure, as she made minute adjustments to their approach vector. She had proven to be a natural pilot, her enhanced reflexes and three-dimensional spatial awareness making her better at flying than most humans. She wore practical civilian clothing, a form-fitting jumpsuit in deep burgundy that complemented her skin tone, and her purple hair was braided in a complex pattern that spoke of Zarathi cultural traditions adapted for her new life. Kepler Colony is requesting an emergency delivery of medical supplies, she said, reading from the communications display. They're offering standard commercial rates plus a discretionary bonus for rapid delivery. Discretionary bonus usually means they don't want to explain why they need the supplies so urgently, Kyle observed, or why they're willing to accept them from a ship with a Zarathi crew member. She glanced at him with a slight smile. Apparently, having me on the manifest causes complications with certain customs agencies and shipping authorities. Kyle laughed. Can't imagine why. Their ship was small but efficient, designed for independent cargo runs that the major shipping corporations couldn't be bothered with. They had purchased it with the proceeds from their first few jobs. Cale's knowledge of human trade routes combined with Vex Andra's understanding of Zarathi space and culture had proven surprisingly valuable to certain clients who operated in the gray areas between legal and profitable. Course plotted and laid in, Vex Andra announced. Jump sequence initiating in 60 seconds. Cal settled back in his command chair, watching her work with the kind of contentment that came from finding exactly where you belonged in the universe. 6 months ago, she had been a broken warrior left to die in alien soil. Now she was here, whole and strong and choosing her own path through the stars. The transformation was remarkable, but what amazed him most was how natural it seemed, as if this was who she had always been meant to become. Kyle, she said softly, not looking away from her instruments. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not found me in that crater? Every single day, he replied honestly. Do you? No, she said, finally turning to meet his gaze, because I know exactly what would have happened. I would have died alone and forgotten, just another casualty of a war that serves no one. Everything that came after, the healing, the choices, the freedom to decide my own fate, all of it exists because you believe that my life had value. Your life has value because you're living it, Kyle said. I just reminded you that you had one to live. She reached across the gap between their chairs, her fingers intertwining with his with perfect naturalness. Then remind me again. The stars outside stretched into lines of light as they jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward their next destination and whatever adventures waited there. Behind them, the war continued its bloody course. Humans and Zarathi locked in a conflict that seemed to have no end and no purpose beyond the perpetuation of ancient hatreds. But here, in the space between worlds, they had found something different. They had found each other. Jump complete, Vexandra announced. Estimated arrival at Kepler Colony in 14 hours. Plenty of time for dinner, Kyle said. And maybe that conversation about the future we keep postponing. Vexandra's smile was radiant with possibility. What kind of future did you have in mind? The kind where we keep doing this. Traveling, trading, helping people who need help. Building something worthwhile together. A life, she said, as if testing the concept on her tongue. A good life. She was quiet for a moment, her amber eyes thoughtful as she considered the implications. I used to believe that a warrior's only legacy was the enemies she had defeated, the battles she had won, the fear she had instilled in her foes. But now I think perhaps the greatest victory is simply choosing to live well and help others do the same. And are we? Living well? Vexandra looked around their small ship, not much by most standards, but clean and functional and entirely theirs. Free, chosen, real. Yes, she said with absolute certainty, we are. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal lives. But inside the aurora's dawn, two souls who had found each other in the darkness were writing their own story. One jump at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time.